We exhaust ourselves trying to rearrange the outer world, as in having a better job, more money, different city. We are convinced that once we finally get the circumstances right, we'll feel the way we want to feel. Every great teacher who ever walked this earth pointed in the opposite direction. Neville Goddard taught that consciousness is the only reality. Carl Jung said that who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. The Buddha claimed that with our thoughts, we make the world. Alan Watts reminded us that we aren't separate from existence, but existence itself, temporarily wearing a human form. These are just a few examples, all different centuries and languages, but pointing to one truth. Instead of thinking that the world happens externally of you, this lesson today will shift that perception into realizing that the world you experience happens from within you. And once you understand this and practice these principles we are about to discuss, everything changes. Most of us grow up believing in a world that exists independently of our perception. Solid walls, other people, objects that persist whether we're looking at them or not. So we conclude that reality is primary and our minds are secondary. The world acts and we simply react, right? Not at all. Goddard called this living from the outside in. Good things happen and you feel good. Bad things happen and you feel bad. You're at the mercy of conditions you didn't create and can't control. The great teachers reversed the equation. Goddard said consciousness is the only reality. Everything you perceive is consciousness made visible. Your inner state doesn't respond to your outer world. Your outer world responds to your inner state. Jung approached it differently, but arrived at the same place. He said the world you see is inseparable from the psyche that sees it. You don't perceive reality as it is. You perceive it filtered through your unconscious patterns, your complexes, your buried beliefs. Two people can witness the same event and experience completely different realities because they're looking through different lenses. The Buddha went further. He taught that suffering doesn't arise from circumstances, but from the mind's relationship to circumstances. Freedom is not changing what happens. Rather, it is changing how you hold what happens. This is the reversal, where inner determines outer. Transformation begins within because there's nowhere else for it to begin. Carl Jung spent his life mapping territories most people never know exist within them. Shadow aspects they've rejected. Archetypes that animate their choices without their knowledge. Complexes running automatic programs in response to invisible triggers. He said something devastating and true. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The patterns you keep living. The same conflicts reappearing with different faces. The problems you solve only to find them waiting for you again 6 months later. The same conflicts keep appearing because something buried is trying to be seen. A man who never examined his relationship with authority keeps finding himself at war with every boss. A woman who won't acknowledge her shadow keeps attracting partners who mirror exactly what she denies in herself. Someone carrying unconscious beliefs about scarcity recreates poverty regardless of how much they earn. The circumstances change, but the pattern repeats because it originates from within you. Jung called the conscious work of meeting these buried parts individuation, becoming who you actually are instead of who you were conditioned to be. Individuation requires you to turn inward and face what emerges. Neville Goddard understood imagination as causation itself. Most people treat imagination like fantasy, something you do when you're bored. But Goddard understood it as the mechanism through which reality takes form. When you imagine something vividly and accept it as true, you set creation in motion. He taught that your consciousness, your sense of who you are and what's real, creates your experience. Not metaphorically, but quite literally. If you hold yourself as limited, limitation appears. If you assume abundance, abundance manifests. The outer world reflects your assumptions. Look around. Everything you see was imagined first. The chair beneath you, the building surrounding you, the phone in your hand. Someone held it in their mind before it existed in matter. They felt it as real, and it became real. Your life works the same way. Your relationships, your circumstances, your health. They began as imaginal acts, as assumptions you held until they hardened into facts. This is why the journey must start within. Your outer world echoes invisible assumptions playing out in a visible form. The Buddha acknowledged pain as inevitable. Bodies age, relationships end, loss is real. Yet he saw a distinction most people overlook. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is what the mind adds to pain. Suffering is the story you tell about the pain. It is the why me, the if only, the endless mental argument with what is. You can experience pain without suffering if you stop adding the story. The Buddha taught that if you observe your mind carefully, you'll see exactly how it creates suffering. Clinging to what you want, rejecting what you don't, fabricating a permanent self from impermanent experience. Once you see this clearly, you can stop doing it. Awareness dissolves suffering. Watch the mechanism closely, and it releases on its own. This is the inner journey in its most direct form. Attention turns back on itself. Mind investigates mind. You find freedom from compulsive reaction and the belief that peace requires perfect circumstances. Alan Watts had a way of saying profound things simply. He said the feeling of being a separate self, isolated inside your skin and cut off from the world, is a hallucination. You are the universe observing itself from one particular angle. Most people feel fundamentally alone, a small consciousness trying to navigate a large, indifferent cosmos. But Watts said this is a perceptual error. You emerged from this world organically, the way a wave rises from the ocean or fruit grows from a branch. The same intelligence that organizes galaxies and intricates atoms moves through you. You are existence itself wearing this temporary form, playing this specific role. When you see this, the inner journey stops being about fixing a broken self. It becomes about remembering what you've always been, but forgot while you were busy thinking you were something small and separate. The outer path promises that the solution is just one more thing away, one more purchase, one more achievement, one more experience. And sometimes it works for a while. You get what you wanted and feel better. Then the feeling fades and you're back to wanting the next thing. The Buddha called this the hedonic treadmill. Jung saw it in patients who had everything society said should make them happy and still came to him in crisis, feeling empty. Goddard would say the outer path fails because it misunderstands causation. You can't fix a reflection by adjusting the mirror. The outer path is exhausting because it never ends. There's always another problem, another condition to perfect, another threat to defend against. The inner journey, while difficult, is finite. Once you've met your shadows, shifted your assumptions, seen through the mind's illusions, the work completes itself. And the outer world reflects that completion without you having to force it. Turning your awareness inward and noticing what's actually there. Your thoughts, your reactions, your patterns. Most people never look. Jung would call this the first step toward consciousness. You watch yourself, not judging yet, just observing. And you notice that most of what you think and feel runs automatically, conditioned, inherited, or unchosen. The Buddha taught that this clear seeing is itself transformative. When you see how your mind creates suffering, you naturally suffer less. When you see you're identified with thoughts, you hold them more lightly. Goddard added active work. Once you understand that imagination creates reality, you deliberately choose what to imagine. You select the state you want to inhabit and dwell in it until it becomes your dominant frequency. Watts would remind you not to make it grim. You're not trying to become perfect. You're waking up to what's already true. You're already whole. You've just been looking in the wrong direction. Part of you will fight this work. Turning inward means facing what you've avoided, the grief you never processed, the anger you buried, the parts of yourself you rejected and hid. Jung called these rejected parts the shadow. They don't disappear when you deny them. They go into the unconscious and run you from there. The inner journey requires going back to reclaim them, meeting them with honesty and integrating what you find. This work is uncomfortable, and staying distracted is easier. Keeping attention focused outward, staying busy enough to avoid sitting with yourself. But avoidance doesn't work. You can run from yourself for decades, but eventually life corners you. A crisis, a loss, a collapse. Something that forces you to stop and look inward. You can wait for that, or you can choose the journey now. If this episode is resonating with you, please subscribe to continue on this path with us. Thank you and enjoy. The teachers who made this journey all the way through found very similar things. What they discovered is something vast and unwounded, unborn and deathless. Goddard called it your awareness of being, the I am. Consciousness itself, prior to all the stories you tell about yourself. Jung called it the self. Not the small ego you constructed, but the totality of what you are. The Buddha called it your true nature. Awareness watching thoughts come and go, untouched by the content. Watts called it the eternal now. The present moment, always here, always enough. The inner journey reveals what you've always been, but never noticed while your attention was elsewhere. When you rest there, even briefly, the compulsion to change circumstances disappears. The urge to fix yourself dissolves. You see clearly, the problem was imaginary. You were always whole, always connected, never required to earn your existence. The journey inward leads you back to the world, transformed. Jung called it bringing the unconscious into consciousness. You integrate what you found in the depths and bring it into daily life. Goddard would say you return knowing you're not a victim of circumstances, but the creator of your experience. You imagine deliberately instead of by default. The Buddha's students returned to the marketplace after awakening. They didn't abandon life. They engaged fully, but without the suffering that frames from resistance and grasping. Watts said, once you realize you are the universe, you play your role with more grace and less anxiety. You stop taking yourself so seriously because you see through the game. The inner journey transforms the outer life, not necessarily by changing circumstances, though that often happens, by changing who you know yourself to be. The door inward is always open. You can wait until life forces you through it, or you can step through now. Every teacher who walked this path did so not because they were special, but because they were willing. Willing to look and to question. Willing to let go of comfortable lies for uncomfortable truth. And they all found the same thing. The inner journey is the only journey that matters. Every other path is temporary, conditional, dependent on circumstances you can't control. But the inner journey takes you to something unconditional, something that doesn't require the world to cooperate, something always here, always accessible, always enough. You become what you think about. Who looks inside awakens. Consciousness is the only reality. With our thoughts, we make the world. You are existence itself. Different words, same truth. All transformation begins within. The only question is whether you're ready to begin. If this resonated with you, I invite you to listen to the next one. Thank you again.